Hey, it's you, man, from KC95 here. Good evening and welcome to Toasted Tavern. Your host, Scott Tobin, and the man called Wags are ready to bring you the night in sports. So pull up a stool, grab a drink, and let's get toasted.
Well, good evening. Welcome into the Tavern. Thank you again, John Hewlett, for bringing us to you. It's a joy to always hear his voice. I'm Michael Wags, Wagon Connect, joined alongside by my co-host, Scott Tobin, for another week of sports talk, and we've got a lot to dive into tonight. We've got hockey to talk about, baseball, college basketball, a little soccer as well. It's going to be a packed show tonight, Scott.
Yeah, absolutely. We're at that time of year where there's all kinds of sports going on right now. It's kind of the mecca of a lot of sports seasons right now as we're rolling into, like you said, the beginning of kind of the middle of hockey, but the beginning of MLS season, the beginning of MLB season. It's just a perfect time for sports. And then we're in the heart of college basketball right now. So it's a good time to be a sports fan.
Oh, it is a great time to be a sports fan. You'll have to excuse me if my voice is a little raspy today. 7 hockey games I called over the last 3 days, so I'm a little bit worn out. And guess what? There's more on the way over the next 2 weeks. And I know you've been busy as well. What did you have this weekend, and what do you got coming up?
Got a lot of basketball coming up the next couple of weeks as we're rolling into district high school basketball play. So I'll be all over the place calling all kinds of district games in the next couple of weeks and playoffs. And as we roll into basketball and baseball season starting, so I'm going to be busy as well.
Well, at least you're going to have some nice warmer weather if you have any baseball games this week. I know we had a couple in the area locally, and the last couple of days not been too kind as far as the weather's concerned, but we got 60-degree weather for this next week. So if you got any baseball games, yeah, sign me up, right?
Yeah, we're going to get nice weather, get baseball going, and it may only last for about a week because I think they're calling for snow potentially again, like the 4th or 5th of the month. But at least we're going to see the sun and some warm weather for a few days.
Yeah. I mean, I'll take it, and you know what? If it snows the following week, that's perfectly fine with me because I'll be in Hawaii. So no snow for me in Hawaii. So I'm happy about that.
Yeah, don't rub it in or anything.
You know what? I'll send you the final bill, and you can sit there and go, oh, you know what? Yeah, okay, whatever. I'm not going to pay for that. So, no, it's expensive.
You'll have fun though.
That I will get a chance to see a couple of men's volleyball games. It's going to be an absolute blast. But that's in the future. Let's talk about actually a little bit about the past because we had a very fun week when it comes to hockey, and I know I say that, and it was the NHL All-Star break, and as we've seen with the NBA All-Star game and the Pro Bowl and everything as far as All-Star games are concerned, you think, wow, why is an NHL All-Star game exciting? Well, it wasn't the NHL All-Star game that was exciting because there was no NHL All-Star game. They had the 4 nations face off, and oh my goodness, did we see some incredible games, not only between USA and Canada, but we had Sweden and Finland involved as well. Lots of really, really good hockey. And then it was the mecca of all rivalries, USA-Canada on Thursday night, and we got an absolute instant classic. 9.3 million people tuned in for that game. And for a hockey game, that is a very, very good number. And with the reactions that we saw from it on both the US and the Canadian side, I think the NHL actually did something right and gave us a set of games that people could tune into and enjoy and have that rooting interest for. And then you got probably the best game you could have gotten in that championship game between USA and Canada. I only got a chance to see the third period in overtime. I don't know about you, Scott, but what I saw, I was just floored by, and I had so much fun watching it.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun. You definitely saw what happens when players get to play for their home countries and put their country logos on their jerseys and go represent that. You saw the passion come out from all the countries, all the players, all the countries in this tournament. And yeah, that championship game was awesome. And just added to it the political climate between the U.S. and Canada right now just added a little more intrigue to the whole thing. As we saw Canada boo the USA, the national anthem in Canada in that first game. And then we saw the United States going crazy in Boston at the beginning of that one. So, there was that added to it. And then, that third game, unfortunately, we saw the best of Jordan Binnington in that game. Kind of reminded everybody of what we saw in that playoff run in 19.
Well, I mean, he was in TD Garden in Boston, so the magic seemed to have stuck around for him and Colton Parayko. I mean, Binnington, he was very much maligned throughout this Four Nations tournament. Kind of gave up a soft goal against the U.S. in that first game, a couple other softies that he gave up throughout that tournament. But as it got into crunch time, he showed up, and he showed exactly why John Cooper trusted him to be the guy. He was the only goaltender of those four teams that played every single game in that tournament. And it showed you the trust level that Cooper has in Binnington. And you saw that after that game-winning goal, Cooper was the first guy to seek out Binnington and have a quick word in his ear, giving him props and saying, hey, look, there's a reason I went to you, and that was the reason why. Multiple saves in that third period and overtime kept Canada in that game and allowed guys to set things up and eventually lead to that Connor McDavid goal. But for all the fans that were just dumping on Jordan Binnington, I think they finally saw why everybody can appreciate what he does in those moments. Yes, he's going to give up soft goals. He's not a solid keeper for the long stretch, but you get him into those games, and there's probably nobody else anybody would want in that net in a game like that than Binnington, outside of maybe a Marc-Andre Fleury, who's really shown it over the course of his career, or Vasilevsky in Tampa Bay. But Binnington's one of those top guys, and I think he showcased it there. And a lot of Canadian fans and a lot of Blues fans owe Jordan Binnington a big apology, because he showed up once again and came home a champion. He's a three-time champion, minor league level, NHL level, and now at the national level.
Yeah, no, it's extremely impressive. And you're right. He took a ton of flack, especially from Canadian fans going into this tournament. The fact that he was named the starting goalie, and then how he played, even when they won that first game, he was getting torn apart by the fans up there, that they didn't want him to play and he shouldn't be the goalie, and they were going to lose the tournament because of him. And he stepped up and, again, like you just said, proved that he is a big-time goalie. He has his stretches during the regular season, definitely, where he lets in some weak goals. He'll have some rough stretches, but when it's the biggest game, the lights are shining the brightest, we've seen him go out there and just be an absolute superstar.
Yeah, 100%. And that's on a team of superstars that, in kind of a lot of people's estimations for Canada, may have underperformed a little bit as well. I mean, they have so much star power on that team, and it was a little crazy that they didn't score as many goals, especially against the U.S., that they probably could have. And the fact that that game came down to overtime kind of showcased that. I mean, you've got the Connor McDavids and the Cale Makars and the Nathan McKinnons, and they didn't necessarily gel the way I think people expected them to. But at the same time, you have to remember, these guys only came together for about a week and a half. So trying to blend all of these players and their styles into just a generic system, it's difficult to do. And for the Americans, you look at it and you go, well, how did they come together like they did? Well, they're just a blue-collar type of group, and that's kind of what they built. They didn't bring in the superstars that they could potentially have. I mean, a Quinn Hughes, who was dealing with some injuries, was a guy that may have been able to be brought in if there were a couple of other injuries, but they didn't necessarily go complete star power. They built around the system that they wanted to play, and it was showcased in that moment. The real question is are they going to be able to do something next year for the Olympics, get a little bit more of a group together, practice throughout maybe the season next year, and build off of that, because the building blocks are there, but there is another level that the Americans can get to that, if the Canadian team still had that same exact time that the Americans could have, you got to watch out, because it'll probably be Canada just running roughshod over everybody. But at the same time, you look at it and you go, I mean, the Americans were built the way that they were supposed to be built, and they did what they needed to do.
Yeah, like you said, it was just a blue-collar team, a bunch of guys, not the biggest superstars. Some of the guys, a lot of probably casual hockey fans didn't know a lot of the guys on the U.S. team, but they came together and they played well, and it will be interesting to see what kind of team they can put together for the Olympics. And you just hope that the U.S. is able to get guys to come out, and you hope that the unfortunate injury to a guy like Matthew Tkachuk in this tournament, in the championship game, doesn't cause guys to not want to play in these tournaments or the Olympics, because, as rumors are, Tkachuk could be done for the season. And, teams may come out and ask players, kind of try to get players not to play in these kinds of things to keep them healthy for the regular season, which you can understand that too with the financial investment the teams put into these players.
Oh, 100%. I mean, it's definitely a risk that is being taken when you have something outside of a regular season going on. And there was agreements made between the NHLPA and the NHL about these guys' participation in things like the Olympics and all of that nature. So really, I mean, the reason that it got to this point is because the players did push for these types of events. It had been 10 years in a sense since, NHL players had played US versus Canada. I mean, you just go back to the 2010 Olympics with that epic game and golden goal by Sidney Crosby. I mean, it has been a long time since players at the NHL level got to participate in those types of games. And we've seen what the World Juniors have produced and the excitement that has been. And I think the Players Association has been pushing for this for a long time, and they were able to get the owners to agree to some sort of schedule and understanding that this was going to happen. But you hit it on the head, though. I mean, some of these guys, the way that they're getting injured, the fact that a guy like Matthew Tkachuk could be out because maybe he did go a little bit harder than he should have gone in that game leading up to that Canadian game and gets injured. I mean, that's always going to be there. It's going to be interesting, though, over the next handful of years when you see these Olympics and maybe another Four Nations or maybe a World Cup of hockey that happens. If you see more and more of these injuries in the next collective bargaining agreement, there may have to be more concessions made by the players in order to get the team owners to sign off on this being the case. But one way or the other, it was exciting. It's incredibly exciting to think about the Olympics. The only thing that has a bit of a downer on it is the fact that, a team like Russia isn't a part of that. So can you look at that and really say that the best on best is actually happening? I understand the political side of things with the war in Ukraine going on and the reason why the IIHF has kind of deemed that Russia and those groups can't participate. But at the same time, you're missing out on guys like an Alexander Ovechkin being at that level and showcasing on the international stage what they can do. So a little disappointed in that. We'll see if maybe some sort of rectification can happen before the Olympics next year.
Yeah, it's very possible. I mean, they're trying to work out a ceasefire over there right now, so it's potential that Russia, and all of those countries will be able to play in the Olympics. And like you said, it will be a better understanding. Get to see more of the world's best players if that happens.
Well, and you talk about that, and yes, it's next year. Is a guy like Alex Ovechkin a candidate for that team? And you sit there and you go, he's 40 years old now, and yeah, no, he can't be a part. But the dude's 13 away from breaking Wayne Gretzky's all-time goal scoring record. Had a hat trick today. So, is a guy like Ovechkin someone that if the Russian team is allowed in, do you think he's the flag bearer for that program?
If he wants to be, I think that comes down to a personal decision. But yeah, I think absolutely, if he wants to do it, I think you have to give him the opportunity because he's one of the greatest players, not just one of the greatest Russian players, one of the greatest players we've seen in the NHL in history.
Yeah, 100%. All right, that's enough of the Four Nations. Congratulations to Canada and all the Canadian fans up there for a thrilling victory in that one. We'll get you in the Olympics. You bet on that. We'll get you in the Olympics. I mean, it's 45 years since the Miracle on Ice. So, I mean, what's a good 46-year anniversary present? Well, that's to win an Olympic gold medal.
There you go.
But we will stick with hockey and stick with the Blues because what Jordan Binnington did in that Four Nations Cup kind of sets up what potentially could be happening here as we get closer and closer to the NHL trade deadline as well. Blues were back in action yesterday, fell in over in a shootout to the Winnipeg Jets. Joel Hofer was in net for that one. Jordan Binnington's in net tonight against Colorado. Blues came into the third period with a 3-1 lead. A bit of a surprise there considering how good Colorado has been over the last handful of years, but Binnington has looked good. And yes, people are gonna look at the goal he gave up and go, oh, that was a soft one. Well, no, it was a shot that was rising that got tipped down back to the bottom of the ice. Not a lot of goalies are going to stop that anyway. You can't say it's a soft goal. Outside of that, he has been very, very good. With the Blues kind of being in that maybe in, maybe out playoff position, you have to start thinking about what they're going to do at the trade deadline. And there's always been talk over the last couple of years of a guy like Binnington being moved, despite having a partial no trade clause and this team really trying to make sure they stay in a playoff window. If this team is out of it near the deadline, is there any possibility, especially with the way he's played recently, that Jordan Binnington could be a guy that's on the block and the Blues would move to try and just maybe change the momentum of the franchise?
I mean, I think it's possible. It's going to come down to, like you said, how they play in the next couple of weeks, whether they still have a shot at the playoffs or not, going into that trade deadline. I mean, whether it looks like they have a decent shot at the playoffs, I should say. And then, I think a lot of it's going to come down to, I think, like you said, he's got a partial no trade clause. I think if you get to that point, you have to sit down with Jordan Bennington and say, okay, what do you want to do? Do you want to be here and be part of rebuilding this thing and trying to make it a cup contender? Or do you want to go somewhere now, kind of in the prime of your career still, and see if you can win another cup? And, I think it's got to be a joint decision. And then a lot of it's got to come back to what the return is for Jordan Bennington, because you're not just going to trade him for, nothing. You've got to get a decent return for him. So I think all of those things kind of go together to make that decision, but it's going to be really interesting. But yes, I do think it's possible that if they struggle in the next few weeks, that you do see him at least have it on the table of moving him.
Yeah, I mean, it's somebody's going to want him. I mean, obviously, you see what he's done, and if you're going for a championship, if you can get a goaltender like that, you're going to try and make that move. Although the teams that are in a position to win the championships usually have a good goalie in net as well. So it will be interesting to see. I mean, you look at what the potential quote unquote rebuild could be for this franchise. I mean, you've got Jordan Kyrou signed long term, you've got Robert Thomas signed long term, both at roughly about $8.1 million a year over the next couple of years. And with the salary cap raising like it's supposed to do over the next couple of years, those contracts actually are looking really, really good for the St. Louis Blues. At the time, everybody was questioning it, going, why would you sign these guys at that age to that contract? Well, next year and the year after, you go, okay, if they could put up 25 goals apiece, maybe 25, 30 assists as well, and, get into that 60, 70 point range, that looks like a really, really good deal for both of those. You got Braden Shen signed long-term as well for the next couple of years. He's another guy that's had his name out on the block as well. And then outside of that, I mean, your forward group, really majority are signed just through next year. Jake Neighbors is the only one signed past next year. And that actually is kind of good news. One of the things that Doug Armstrong's done that maybe actually is really good. We saw him kind of, screw up with the defensive signings, really locking in a bunch of guys long-term on the defensive side and maybe hamstringing himself there. But with all the young forwards that this team has coming up, you've got a lot of room for them to grow in there. And looking at that, get into Jordan Bennington's mind and say, okay, hey, Jordan, we've got a lot of young players coming up the forward position. Yes, our defense is going to be relatively steady for the next couple of years. It is aging. Don't get me wrong. It's aging. We do have a couple of young defenders coming up as well. Is that something you want to do? You're Jordan Bennington. That is put out there. What is your answer?
It goes back to his mindset, man. Does he love it here? Does he want to be a part? Does he love being a Blue? Does he believe in this young group and the prospects that are coming? And does he want to stay here and be part of it and try to get this team back to a second Stanley Cup? Or does he feel like, maybe it's going to be 4 or 5 years and, I'm going to be kind of at the tail end of my career at that point before really a legitimate cup contender. Maybe I do want to move on. So it just all goes down to what his mindset is of exactly what he thinks of this team and of the prospects, and, whether he's committed to being here for a couple of years to try to build it back up, or if he's thinks, best thing for me at this point in my career is to move on and try to go somewhere else and help them win a cup. So it all comes down to really his mindset in my mind.
Yeah, I think you're right. And I'll be perfectly honest, the fact that he's got, young child and has got a cup here and seems to have settled in here, I almost feel like he will stick around. If they were to approach him and say, do you want to move? I think he's going to say, I'm good here, because he could go to a Toronto and have to deal with all of that. Yes, he's familiar with Craig Berube, and I think he may be protected a little bit there, but to go into that powder keg of an environment, and if he doesn't win a championship, that could really screw with his mindset. And this is a guy that it took a while to get his NHL shot anyway. So I feel like he's got that mindset of, I'm going to stay true to the program that eventually believed in me, and I'm going to be here long term because he likes the group coming in. I mean, we saw Michael Buchinger last night just absolutely destroy a guy in a fight. He's one of those young defensemen coming up. And if he's got guys like that in front of him, I think that's going to excite him and make him want to stick around long term. So I'm excited to see how that plays out. But as you said, trade deadline's coming up. Anything can happen. And your captain is a guy that has been potentially on the block as well. But it sounds like to me that Armstrong is going to shoot for the moon on any Braden Shen deal. Do you see a team being dumb enough to pay for a Braden Shen to come in and be a third line guy?
It's just going to depend on how desperate a team is. If there's a team out there that says, okay, we really need that veteran leadership to really come in and really maybe be that missing piece that we need to really make a cup run. If there's a team like that, then maybe somebody does say, okay, we'll give you whatever we want because we feel like Braden Shen is that last piece that puts us over the top. So I think that's the question. Is there that team that needs that veteran guy that kind of they feel like will be that leader that gets them over the top? And we'll just have to see what happens in the next few weeks.
Yeah, we all know it's going to be Vegas, and they're going to circumvent the cap somehow, and that's just going to be how it is. So, so that's where we're at. We're a couple weeks away from the trade deadline. Blues still going strong against the Avalanche right now. I got it on my TV on to my left here, 3-1, about halfway through that third period. So looking to pick up a very big win in the Central. So we'll keep track right now as we go on, but let's go ahead and switch gears because we're talking about the cold, and then we talked about the fact that it's going to get warmer. Well, what happens when it gets warmer? Baseball season starts. And I know both of us has kind of been a little bit down, but also a little bit excited about this upcoming season. We had a game today against the Astros, and yes, the scoreline didn't go the way that the Cardinals want it to go, but it's spring training. You're never going to have a scoreline go the way you want it to go in spring training. It's more about looking at those individual moments in these games to kind of see what to expect. And there were a couple of different guys that really kind of stood out, one on the offensive side / defensive side and one on the pitching side. And we'll start with the offense, and JJ Weatherholt just absolutely showed up in his first spring training game today. I mean, he got a bloop base hit, but then the absolute 3-run bomb was all over the place. And he's a guy that I think a lot of people can get excited about. Don't go buy a jersey just yet, though, because he doesn't have his MLB number yet, and you're going to have to wait just a little bit. So don't buy the Weatherholt jersey just yet. But I know you've seen a lot of things from him that you're excited about as well. What did you see today, and what can we expect from him going forward?
I mean, he's a special kid. A lot of people probably don't know a whole lot about him yet. He was the Cardinals. If you don't know, he was the Cardinals' first-round pick this past season and the number 7 pick overall. And basically going into the draft, a lot of people had him going as the number 1 player overall. He was the top hitting prospect in last year's draft. He had a hamstring injury that kind of pushed him back last year. And shockingly, in a lot of people's eyes, he was able to fall to 7, and the Cardinals were lucky enough to land him. The kid's a star. I mean, he's got all the potential in the world, especially on all the offensive hit tools to really be a superstar. And just go back, and if you haven't seen the home run he hit today, you don't even need to see it. Just turn the volume up and listen to the sound of that ball come off his bat. There's a different sound when he hits the ball. And, people talk about that with people. I mean, that's what Mark McGwire said he first realized about Albert Pujols was, that sound when you hear it. And today, when he hit that home run, I mean, it was a different sound than anything else you heard come off of anybody's bat. And he's not only is he that, he's got a great defensive skills too, which I know I saw a lot of people today going, he's a shortstop. What are you going to do with a shortstop? Well, you can move him. He was initially a second baseman. He grew up a second baseman. That's his initial position. But he's also capable to play the outfield. And there's been some talk that maybe they look at moving him to center field. And I know some people will say, oh, man, the Cardinals moving another prospect around. But, if you can play shortstop, you can play anywhere. I mean, that's usually the most athletic guy on your field. And so if you can play shortstop, you can play center field. So, if that's something they're thinking about, you hope they do it right away and get him ready to go, because you hope that he's not a shortstop up here, because you're hoping Mason Wynn's got that position locked down for a long time. So then you have to decide, do you want him to be your second baseman? Do you want him to be a center fielder? And you need to figure that out, and you need to figure it out pretty quickly, because I don't think the kid's going to be in the minor leagues very long. I don't think he makes the team coming out of spring training, but it would not shock me to see him up here in June or July, because I think he's going to go he's probably going to start in Double-A, probably be in Triple-A by, I would say, probably May or June. And then, like I said, it wouldn't shock me if, in into July, 1st of August, you see him up here. I mean, he's got that kind of potential. He's I know people will say, oh, Cardinal prospect, everybody's hyping him, but this is different. This isn't Dylan Carlson. This isn't some of those guys. This isn't, even Jordan Walker. I mean, this was the number 7 kid overall in the country that came out. I mean, this is something the Cardinals don't draft very often. So this is a special player, and he's going to be and he's excited to be a Cardinal. I don't know if you've seen his comments and heard him talk, but he is very, very excited about the way the Cardinals are headed. He likes what he's seen as far as the moves they made with improving the minor league staffing and the way things are going down there. And he's excited to be here. And I think he's going to be the next Cardinal fan favorite. I think Jordan Walker and Mason Wynn are going to really really put their stamp on that this year. But I think J.J. Weatherholt is going to be the next name you really need to know as you're paying attention to Cardinal baseball.
Well, and you say that, obviously shortstop, he started off as a second baseman. Yes, we've got a guy like Nolan Gorman over at second base, but Gorman is a guy that has been platooned because he's a left-handed bat. He's a guy that has struggled at different points in the last couple seasons, kind of keeping things going forward. And that's not to say he doesn't have a lot of potential. He's got pop. He's done nicely acclimating himself to second base. So there's nothing wrong with the fact that you have a guy like Nolan Gorman there at second. But at the same time, the DH is in the National League, and I don't like to pigeonhole a guy that's worked that hard into a strictly hitting position. But at the same time, if you can put a guy like Gorman in that DH spot, move Weatherholt over to second base, have a young middle of the infield and win in Weatherholt, I think that is almost best case scenario. And I may get crucified for this one, but Alec Burleson at first base. I know he doesn't strike you as the prototypical first baseman of the current generation, but we go back to the 90s and the early 2000s, the build of first basemen was not the slim, stretchy kind of guy. It was the big guys. McGuire was a first baseman. You had Cecil and Prince Fielder as first baseman. You had, what's his face from Boston. I cannot believe I lost his name all of a sudden. Big Papi was a first baseman in Minnesota for a while. So Burleson has definitely that type of physique, but I saw him play some good defense last year. I saw him chasing balls into foul territory, into the dugouts. He is a hard worker. I would love to see, and this doesn't mean I want to get rid of Wilson Contreras because I feel like he does have a place on this team, but if you're going to skew toward this younger squad, put Burleson over there at first base. Yes, Burleson and maybe Weatherholt and Wynn in this season, it may lead to some errors. It may lead to some frustration, but it gives them those opportunities at the major league level to make those mistakes, but not feel like it's going to cost them. And I'd love to see that because it would build excitement. And the fact that you still got Nolan Arenado over there at third base that can kind of help mentor these kids and keep them growing is a good sign as well. And then outfield is a mess. I'm just going to say it. The outfield is an absolute mess. And I didn't want to get into it, but I think I'm going to. The hype around Lars Nootbaar, I still don't get, and I don't understand why this is happening. So I'm getting it out there. Let's move on. Let's figure out what we can do with him and get rid of him and all of that stuff. But that's out there. Again, that's two things that I'm going to get crucified for: the Burleson, the first base, and getting rid of Nootbaar. But that's where I stand.
Yeah, I agree with you to a certain extent on both of those. I think Burleson's going to get a fair amount of time at first base because I think they're going to kind of rotate those guys around, between first base and DH. And, Burleson can play some outfield. His defense was definitely much better in the outfield last year than it was 2 years ago. So I think he's going to get a shot at all three of those positions. And, you go back to Nolan Gorman, is he a second baseman? Is he the DH? It's still possible. Who knows what's going to happen? He may end up at third base, at some point, because while Nolan Arenado is here right now, he may not be here all year. So third base may ultimately still be where Nolan Gorman ends up, and that is his position. That's where he came up through the minors, was as a third baseman and as a pretty solid third baseman. So we'll see how all of that plays out. But yeah, the infield is going to be interesting. It's going to be interesting to see whichever one of those guys plays first base, because I'm not 100% sure that Wilson Contreras is going to be the best defensive first baseman either. Everybody keeps saying, oh man, he put on all this weight and muscle, and so he's going to be a big bat at first base. We'll see. We'll see how it works. Maybe he surprises us. Maybe he's really, really good. I'm not 100% sold on that yet. So we'll see how that experiment plays out as we go through spring training. And then the outfield, like you said, is kind of a crazy mess right now because you've got to find a spot for Brendan Donovan. I mean, I don't care where he plays defensively, but he's got to play somewhere. He's got a glove that can play about 6 different positions. So you just got to get him on the field and let him play. Jordan Walker, you've got to put him in right field every day and just, deal with it. We saw him improve quite a bit last year defensively. So I think if he goes out there and plays every day and knows that he's going to be out there every day, I think that helps a lot too. And then the center field thing, there's still a lot of questions there. Can Victor Scott hit enough to be your center fielder? He got a couple hits today, had an RBI. Michael Ciani, we know, is a good ball player. I think he'll make this team no matter what, whether he's a starter or whether he's off your bench as a defensive guy. And then, the wild card is Lars Nootbaar because, like you said, I've been vocal for the last couple of years criticizing Nootbaar. There's no question the guy's got talent, and a lot of people, rave about him, and a lot of them are the nerdy metrics guys that look at his hard hit rate and those kind of things, which I don't really care about because who cares if he hits the ball hard if he gets out every single time? And then they talk about his eye, which, he draws a lot of walks. He also strikes out a lot. He reminds me a lot of Matt Carpenter because he will stand there at the key moment in the game with the bases loaded and take strike 3 right down the middle and then argue with the umpire, and that drives me insane. But he does have some potential. He's got some pop. He's got a good glove. So, if he's healthy, he can be a piece to this team. But I think this is the make or break year. I think if you get to the middle of the season and he's not producing, or if one of those other guys steps up, I think this is it for Lars. He either makes it or he's gone here. And I think a lot of those guys are at that place because you've got the new regime coming in with Chan Bloom next year, and he doesn't have that connection that Mo Zaylock has. Mo won't move a lot of these guys because he was part of bringing them in, and they're his guys, and he doesn't want to have the idea of moving somebody and have them do better when they go somewhere else. Bloom's not going to have that. He's not going to have that connection to these guys. If they play well, great. If not, he's not going to have a problem moving on. So I think it's a make or break year for a Nootbaar, for a Alec Burleson, for even possibly Wilson Contreras. I think you're going to see a lot of that this year.
Well, and Bloom's a guy that, is starting to revamp the minor league system. So if you're going to ever get younger guys into positions to learn and grow themselves, it's going to be under Bloom's leadership because he's fresh into this. He doesn't have the pressure it is to win a championship because Mo had a championship in his resume early on in his time here as the general manager. So it is a bit of a change as well. We threw up a comment from our buddy Mason about Jordan Walker needing to play every day. Also, the $1 Cardinals tickets he's going to take because the product on the field doesn't matter. He cares about younger guys showing they can play consistently. Burleson, again, keep him there to learn. Don't play him there for 10 games and then move him off because he wasn't consistent. And that's kind of the question I have there is the mindset of Cardinals fans. We obviously saw last year them voicing their displeasure by not showing up to games. And it wasn't incredibly drastic. I mean, there were still a lot of games with a lot of empty seats. You worked there, so you saw it. But do we see the mindset being, okay, we know that the regime is changing. We know we've got a lot of young stars coming up, and we want to keep those young stars. But so by keeping those young stars, it means we need to show up and show that we support the organization. Maybe not a person or people that are running certain things, knowing that it's going to change in the next couple of years. So do you see the mindset being, hey, you know what? Cardinals tickets, they're not going to be great this year, but the Cardinals tickets are only $1 or $5 here for a weekend series or something like that. Is that something that may bring fans back? Is the excitement of the young players coming in going to help overcome the displeasure that people have with Mo and the direction that he has taken this franchise over the last handful of years?
The thing that's going to change the mindset is just playing good baseball. Cardinal fans know what they want to see on a baseball field. They know what Cardinal baseball is when they see it. And if they play good baseball, you have these young guys, if they play exciting baseball, if Mason Wynn goes out there and plays exciting baseball, if Jordan Walker turns into the player we all think he can be, if a Victor Scott or Michael Ciani plays great center field, fans will start to show up again and they'll come, and winning will help that as well. We saw it last year when they started to play well and it looked like they were going to make a run in June and July. The ballpark was back to being full every night. So, fans will respond with how this team plays. If they play well and they're exciting to watch and they're fun to watch and they're stealing bases and they're playing good defense and they're playing good fundamental baseball, even if fans are mad at Mo and they're mad at the DeWitts, they will show up. If the pitching's bad, if the defense is bad, if they can't hit again with runners in scoring position, and it looks like it has the last couple of years, then they won't. So, I mean, it all comes down to performance on the field, and that's going to be the determining factor no matter what. Whether people are mad or happy with ownership, it's going to come down to how things look on the baseball field.
Well, real quick, just want to interject. The Blues won 3-1 against Colorado. Mason, not happy. Winning too many games right now for his liking, and I can understand that because he wants a high draft pick, but that's neither here nor there. Let's continue on this Cardinals conversation as well. You got to look at, again, what they did today at the start of spring training. We talked a little bit about Weatherholt, but now on the pitching side, and that's kind of been the question mark for this franchise the last couple of years is where's the pitching coming from? We've got a lot of older guys on contracts that maybe don't match the way that they are producing, but a lot of young kids getting ready to come back up. One of those showcasing today, Tekoa Roby, pitched very, very well in his 2 innings, struck out 3, and he had some wicked movement on his pitches. And he's one of those guys that isn't necessarily at the top of the list of the young pitchers that people are talking about, but he might be the one that makes the first impact on this team. So, you look at Roby and you look at these other guys, who in your mind is the first guy up if somebody falters here at the major league level? And then if it's not Roby, where do you see him ranking in that hierarchy?
I think he's probably right up there, because he's been in the higher levels in the minor leagues the last couple of years. He was a big part of one of the trades when the Cardinals made those trades a couple of years ago at the trade deadline. He was a guy they kind of targeted in one of those packages. So I think he's a guy that's going to get a real chance. I mean, I think Michael McGreevy's probably the first guy. If he doesn't make the team out of spring training, I think he's the first one that gets that shot. And then I think he's probably next. And then, we're going to see what happens. A guy like Gordon Crescefo, what does he look like in spring training this year? He had some chances last year, looked pretty decent. And a few times we saw him up here in the big leagues. He had a couple of starts where he was decent. He had a couple of bullpen appearances where he was good. So he's going to get a good look. And then, the kids that are coming, the kids that everybody's starting to talk about, what does Quinn Matthews do this spring? Is it possible for Quinn Matthews to be in this rotation when the season starts? I mean, it's a long shot, but if he goes out there and pitches like he pitched last season in the minor leagues, he's going to be knocking on the door if he doesn't make the team right out of spring. And Tink Hintz isn't too far behind him. He's shown what he's needed to show, and maybe a guy like Hintz, you may see him start out in the bullpen when he gets up here. I don't think they do that with Matthews. I think when Matthews comes, he's in the rotation. But I think Hintz may get a shot at the bullpen because he may be kind of that Carlos Martinez guy where he's in the bullpen for a year or two before he transitions into the starting rotation, just because of his body style, the way he pitches, just kind of to assimilate to the major leagues and really get comfortable before he throw him in the rotation. Whereas I think Matthews is a little more polished. He was a college pitcher where Hintz came straight out of high school. So I think Matthews probably makes that jump faster, and he's the guy right now that everybody's really excited about with what he did last year.
Well, I mean, yes, of course. I think everybody was jumping on the Matthews bandwagon last year, and I think if he can showcase that again here in the spring, he does have a really, really good shot of breaking camp with the team. But we talked about it last week a little bit, just kind of the mindset of what the pitching staff is going to get here in the spring. Obviously 2-3 innings max potentially for some of these guys. And how do you make that determination of a guy making the rotation or your bullpen when you have such a small sample size? So, like a guy like Semmer Bursey, who today gave up 9 hits and 9 runs against the Astros, if that's his only look, or he only gets another 2 or 3/3 of an inning, how does that square with the mindset of trying to get good looks at these guys?
Yeah, that's the bad thing about spring training is you can come up and really look bad, and you may only get a couple of chances. He may have blown his shot to, as sad as that is to say, a couple innings, that may have been his shot to make the team out of spring. Doesn't mean we don't see him later in the year, but he may have to go down in the minors and pitch really well down there and then get an opportunity. But yeah, spring training, you've got to take advantage of the few opportunities you get, and that's what it's going to come down to is who shines, who steps up, who really makes an impression. And it may be somebody that you're not expecting that goes out and just absolutely does something that you were like, wow, where did this kid come from? We've seen that happen before. If you remember a couple of springs ago, not a pitcher, but there was a guy named Lars Nootbaar that had an unbelievable spring. And everybody was like, is that really this kid's name, Lars Nootbaar? But, the spring training that he had a couple of years ago kind of is what catapulted him to being a prospect and making the Cardinals take another look. And we've seen it happen. Andre Palante did it a couple of years ago. Nobody was really talking about Andre Palante, and he had a really good spring. So guys do that, and then all of a sudden they're really on the radar. And that's what it is, man. It comes down to just taking advantage of the opportunities when you get them.
Well, and another wonderful comment here. First off, Mason agrees with you about McGreevy. Definitely excites you. But this is the thing I got to talk about. The future of St. Louis sports all have year 2000 birthdays. Feel old yet? Well, I'll be perfectly honest. I do, because last night and today I heard songs on the radio that were from my high school days, and they were on the way back weekend. So I'm starting to get the understanding that I am old, and now seeing not only the future of St. Louis sports having 2000 birthdays, but the fact that we're seeing sons and daughters of former players that I watched growing up, not only being at the beginning, but sometimes even in the middle of their careers now, that makes me feel old as well.
Yeah, it happens quick. But yeah, that's when you really realize it was when you're listening to the radio. You're like, wait a minute, how is this on way back weekend? How is this an oldie? This is like, this song just came out. And then they're like, it came out in 1994. And you're like, wait, what? How is that possible?
Well, the fact that Green Day is way back for their American Idiot CD, and now Dookie is now classic, that makes me feel even older. And the one that got me was the one last night. I was driving home and I heard Jet. And Jet doesn't seem like a band that you would go, yeah, that's a way back band. But it is, because it was like 2004.
Yeah, it was 20 plus years ago. I know, it's crazy. It happens fast, man.
Yeah, and Mason, don't worry. You will get there very soon as well. So eventually things will be old for you too. So yeah. But with the Cardinals, it is kind of exciting to see what is going to happen this year. And the fact that we're going to have the ability to watch games again this year. I know they've been on TV, but it's been hard to get games for the Cardinals the last 2 years. And I think fans, including myself, are like, okay, I didn't have to watch them this year. But now that, they're going to be on FanDuel and it's going to be at a reasonable price, and you get a chance to watch them and potentially see these young players, I'm getting my excitement level up for this season, even though the Cardinals may not and probably won't make the playoffs. It's going to be exciting to see these young players go out and showcase. I love what I see from Mason Wynn. I'm very hopeful that Jordan Walker is able to bounce back and really take the hitting lessons from the new hitting coach and grow as a player. I'm real interested to see where these young pitchers start to fit in, and I'm really excited to see how some of these young fielders get into this game as well. So I'm excited. I know you are too, because not only do you work with the Cardinals and you're at Busch Stadium all the time, but you are a Cardinals fan and you want to see them succeed. And I know you're excited about it as well.
I am. I think, this team has the potential to be better than everybody thinks they're going to be. Part of that has to do with the fact that the Central Division probably isn't going to be very good. But, I think, if things break right for this team and some of these guys step up and mature and do a little bit more than they did last year, if they take those next step and, some of the young pitchers progress, and even if some of the veterans can come back and make a difference, if a guy like Steven Matz could surprise everybody and stay healthy, there's no question that Matz has all kinds of talent. Whether he's in the rotation or the bullpen, that could be huge for this team. Does Sonny Gray have a better year than he did in his first year? That's huge for this team. Can Ryan Helsley duplicate what he did last year? I mean, there's a lot of questions, but there's also a lot of things to be excited about. Can Alec Burleson improve on what he did in the first half last year? Like you said, Jordan Walker, I think everybody's expecting him to take a next step. Does Nolan Gorman take that next step? If Arenado's here, do we see some version of the old Nolan Arenado come back and fire this team up? So there are reasons to believe that this team could be better than people expect. And, like we say all the time, that's why they play the games. And to listen to these guys talk, they all believe they're going to be better than everybody's looking. They expect to be better. They all think they're going to make a statement. And that's what you need. You need teams like this. And I'm going to throw this one last thing out there. We talk about that. In 1985, the year that the Cardinals made their run, the heat is on, the team that everybody talks about, that team was picked to finish fourth in the division, and Whitey was picked to be the first manager to be fired in baseball that year. And they won 105 games, and Vince Coleman showed up. So, anything can happen.
Yeah, Victor Scott could be the next Vince Coleman with the speed that he has out there. Mason Wynn, with the time that he's been spending with Ozzie this summer. I mean, obviously, Ozzie's an absolute legend, and to be able to compare somebody to that is very lofty to be sure, but a Mason Wynn could be like an Ozzie Smith in those moments. And then you've got some of these young pitchers that can really step up as well. So again, I feel like this team actually thrives when they're the underdogs. They were obviously in the two World Series runs. They were not picked to win those series. And, you know, there was even the famous Tigers in 3 back in 06. So, I mean, it's not like this team doesn't understand the pressure of being an underdog. And I feel like they actually like being the underdog, like being kind of forgotten in a sense, because it allows them to go to work without that pressure of being the team to beat. And that could very well, especially like you said, with the division the way it is, set up for a potential playoff run and give a guy like an Nolan Arenado the desire again to stay here. I think he has the desire to stay here. Obviously, nixing that trade to Houston, he kind of wants to be here. I don't think, I mean, they put out a good tweet last week about it. You know, he's had 4 chances to leave this organization in the time that he's been here through opt-outs and things like that, and he hasn't. So it shows that he wants to be here. He came in slimmed down, ready to go as well. So that builds more confidence in the back of my mind that this team could be better than people expect.
It does. And, you know, you have to remember how hard Nolan Arenado fought to get here in the first place because, you know, he fought for a couple of years to end up being a Cardinal. So I don't think he's anxious to leave. I mean, I think if the Dodgers would have made an offer, I think he would have been like, yeah, I'll go home because that is home for him. And he grew up being a Dodger fan. I think if something along those lines happens, I think there's a chance that he may jump at it, which you can't really blame him because, of course, the Dodgers are favored to win and should win. And can you imagine if they added Nolan Arenado to that team, it would make them that much more dangerous. And they kind of need a third baseman. They don't really have a set third baseman right now. But real quickly, we were talking about things that make you feel old. Something else that made me feel old today watching the game, they showed the bench, and David Freese, Daniel Descalso, and John Jay are all sitting there as coaches. And it's like, those guys were just playing yesterday, and you realize that 2011 was 14 years ago.
And they all have gray hair now, and you go, what the heck, man? What happened?
Yep. Yeah. Alan Craig's going to be down there with them this week, too. So they're bringing the old Memphis Mafia back together to help try to get this team ready to go.
Well, and let's touch on that then, because we did touch on it a little bit last week about, you know, the Jim Edmonds comments about, you know, legends of the franchise not being welcome down at spring training and there being a lot of contention and all of that kind of stuff. But this past week, we've seen a multitude of players down there. Ozzie has been down there working. Obviously, you say Freeze, Jay, Descalso, you're going to bring in an Alan Craig. I mean, not necessarily legends, but World Series champions. So they go into that category. Even if the numbers don't put them in the Hall of Fame, they are still Cardinal legends for what they did. And yet they're all down there participating in spring training and helping this team grow. So as we step back a little bit and let the weeks kind of go by, is this more a disgruntled former employee versus the Cardinals organization kind of kicking out former players?
Well, yeah, it's hard to say. As somebody said the other day, Jimmy kind of goes to the beat of his own drum. So it could have been a little bit of Jim Edmonds just having his feelings hurt. But we also have to look at the fact of who is down there. And Ozzie's a legend, you know, and we know how involved Ozzie's been with the franchise the last couple of years. The other guys, they were all minor league teammates of Ollie Marmol that are down there. You know, he was in the minor leagues. He played with Descalso and Jay and Freeze and Craig. They were all on the same team in Arkansas and Springfield. So that's a little bit different too, because these are guys that he grew up with, that he knows a little bit, as opposed to an Edmonds or a McGuire who we heard they asked to come in and they refused. You know, those guys are more legendary guys, you know, high profile guys. So, you know, it's still a question of whether Jimmy exaggerated a little bit, whether it had hurt feelings there, or if there's more to it than that. You know, and I think it'll be interesting to see if we hear anybody else comment about that, you know, in the coming days. Do we see an Adam Wainwright? And it'll be interesting to watch in the next few years. Do you see an Adam Wainwright down there? Do you see a Mark McGuire show up at some point? You know, Larry Walker used to be down there every year. You don't hear about Larry Walker being there anymore. You know, like you said, Chris Carpenter doesn't really get invited to be at spring training like he used to be. So it'll be interesting to see if those real legends, you know, like I said, Ozzie's on a different level because he is a baseball Hall of Famer. He's the greatest shortstop of all time, and he's kind of embedded in that organization, where these other guys have kind of come and gone over the years. And, you know, are they still brought back? So that'll be an interesting thing to see over the next couple of years, what happens there.
I think the real tell will be if you see, the Yachties and the Alberts come back and be a part of spring training. I mean, I know that they have connections to Ollie, and you could read into that what you will as well. But I feel like if the Yachties and the Wainwrights and the Alberts are coming back, it maybe does signify a little bit of, misspeak on Edmonds' part. But until we see that, and I know Yachty and Albert have their coaching careers that they're working on down in their home countries, and there's definitely talk about both of those guys being candidates to replace Ollie at some point. But at the same time, I look at it and go, yeah, as much as we've kind of picked on Ollie here the first couple of years, he hasn't done a terrible job with this team. And I think this, just like you say, it's a make or break year for some of these players. This is probably a make or break year for Ollie too, at the managerial position, especially again with a new regime coming in after this. If he can prove that he can take this team and continue to get them to grow, he sets himself nicely to stick around. But if he doesn't, then things start to change. And then you start to go, okay, do you bring in a guy like an Albert or a Yachty who don't have Major League Baseball experience, but now do have coaching experience under their belt? Guys like, Matheny and Ollie didn't necessarily have that coaching experience that you would want from a first-year manager, and they were learning on the job. And if you get a guy like Albert or Yachty in here with that coaching experience, what does that do? But on the flip side, do you decide to go outside the organization and bring in a guy that has a track record of success? Who that may be, I don't know. Obviously, we still have a manager going right now, so we are not trying to replace him. But a lot of things to think about. And again, this is a make or break year for multiple people in this organization. But because of the excitement surrounding these young players, it actually makes this season a little bit worth it to watch and go and support the team as much as you possibly can.
Oh, absolutely. Can I say real quick, though, talking about managers, if I had to guess, I would be willing, if Ollie's not back next year, I would be willing to throw down $100 and say Skip Schumacher is the next manager of the St. Louis Cardinals, because he's got manager experience in Miami. Yep. He was manager of the year. He's got coaching experience with the Cardinals, with the Padres, with the Dodgers, with the Marlins. He's actually working with the Rangers right now as an assistant to the general manager, so he's getting that experience. And he's got connections. I mean, the hitting coach that we brought in was Skip's hitting coach.
Yeah.
John Jay was Skip's first base coach. We know that Jay and Descalzo both played with Skip. I mean, there's so many connections to Skip there. I think it just makes a ton of sense. And I think Skip would be the next manager more than likely if Ollie leaves.
Yeah, I would agree with you on that one. I'd probably put the same amount of money down to say if Ollie's not here next year, that Skip is the guy that they would bring in, because he does have a good mind as far as baseball is concerned. I mean, obviously, making the switch from center field to second base and all of that shows his willingness to learn the different aspects of the game. And now the fact that he's working as an assistant to the GM means he's getting even more experience in the game of baseball. So yeah, he's definitely a guy that you could throw into that mix and maybe sit there at the top of the list of guys that you would want to bring in for a new manager if that were to be the case. All right, let's move on and talk a little bit about what's probably the most exciting part of the spring, which is March Madness. That is getting closer and closer and closer. Regular seasons are winding down. Conference tournaments will be starting here in the next couple of weeks. And we talked about in the last couple of weeks because they've kind of been trending in different directions. Obviously, Mizzou has been on the rise, continuing to win big game after big game. Illinois has been sinking like a rock. This weekend, kind of a little bit of the same, although Mizzou did lose on the road to Arkansas, a tough place to play. And, when your top 3-point shooter goes cold in a game, it doesn't make it easier to win. And I know a lot of people are giving Caleb Girl a lot of grief for, 2 of 15 from 3-point land in that game. But he's one of the best 3-point shooters in the country. And sometimes you just have an off night. And that's exactly what happened there. I look at it and I go, yes, it's a tough loss. You don't like losing to a team that's under 500 in your conference, but it's such a difficult conference to play in that even an under 500 team can give you trouble. I don't think the loss necessarily hurts Mizzou too much. I think in the polls it might, because the pollsters for some reason have just been waiting for Mizzou to lose games, and when they do, they drop them quickly down the rankings. But for my sake, I don't think it hurts them much, especially considering the gauntlet that they've had to go through and still the gauntlet that they have to go just before the conference tournament.
No, I don't think it'll hurt them too much. It was a frustrating game, though, because you're up by 7 in that first half. At halftime, you're up 7. And Caleb Grill had a good first half. He had 17 points in the first half. Had a couple of threes. A couple of things hurt him in that second half. One of them that nobody's talking about a whole lot is they didn't have their center in there. When you're missing your big man,
Mhm.
Gray didn't play because he was sick, so you're missing him defensively and on the board. So that was a huge loss. And then Mizzou kind of got away from what they've done really well all year. That second half, they started settling for perimeter shots, taking 3-pointers almost every possession. What Mizzou's done really well, yeah, they've been a really good three-pointing team this year, but they've also done a really good job of attacking the basket. They're averaging almost 32 free throw attempts a game. They only had 15 attempts at the line last night. They were settling for 3-point shots. They were settling for jump shots. They weren't playing good defense. They just really had a lot of turnovers. They just played sloppy in that second half, and it got away from them. Because, like I said, they had a 7-point lead at the half, so Arkansas outscored them by 14 in that second half. So, you bounce back, and, I don't think, just like you, I don't think they'll fall too much in the polls. They'll probably fall to 17th or 18th, I would imagine. But, you've got a chance to bounce back and go back up the rankings. And you've still got a real good shot at being the 4 seed going into the tournament, the SEC tournament, especially if you can beat Kentucky. So, it's going to be a tough 4 games left on the schedule, but you can make a run here and get ready. And, I think, as everybody said, even the ESPN announcer said last night, Mizzou really looks like they could be an Elite 8 Final Four type team. And ESPN said that 2 or 3 times last night. So for Mizzou to get that kind of – yeah. People can see it. This team's really got a shot. So I think they'll be fine. They've bounced back from their losses really well this year when they've had them. So I think they rebound, and I think they make a nice run to close out this regular season. And then, hopefully you can make a run, a couple of games in the tournament, and then get ready for the big dance. And, it might benefit Mizzou to not win the SEC tournament. You want to make a run, maybe get to that semifinal game, but maybe it would be with the gauntlet that they've played. Maybe the best thing for them would be to make it to like the semifinal game and then lose, get those extra couple of days of rest where you're not playing Saturday and Sunday, and have almost a full week before you go into your tournament game on Thursday or Friday.
Yeah, I agree with you. And obviously you don't want to wish a loss on a team because you just want to continue to win. But again, like you said, sometimes a loss at the right moment can help reset yourself and get yourself going back on another good run, dealing with injuries, dealing with illness that's going around. Obviously, the flu has been hitting teams across the country in all sports very, very hard. So if you can get yourself rested up and healthy, that's the most important thing going into the tournament. And like you said, they have a tough schedule. Obviously, they've got South Carolina at home on Tuesday, and then they're at Vandy and at Oklahoma on the 1st and the 5th of March before wrapping up at home against Kentucky in an 11 a.m. game on March 8th. So you look at it and you go, yeah, the loss hurts. It stings a little bit because, as you said, they were up, but they've got a chance to right the ship in a sense and then maybe come up with another signature win to end the regular season. I mean, if you look at that, and if they can beat Kentucky, that'll give them 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 wins over top 25 teams this year. And that includes, at the time, number 1 Kansas, who's absolutely fallen off a cliff. At the time, Florida was up there in near the number 1 spot as well. And you've got close losses to Tennessee and A&M. I mean, you look at it and you go, that is a hell of a resume for a program. And it's been a long time since we've seen that for Mizzou. And it's really good to see. And you're seeing the excitement level. I saw a post the other day, a year difference between the Mizzou arena. Last year, it was a completely empty ghost town because they couldn't win a game. This year, absolutely packed, electric, everybody going crazy. And that's what you want to see for that Mizzou program because it is such a legendary program. And to see it back near the top is really good.
Yeah, absolutely. And you talk about the resume. They and Auburn are the only 2 teams in the country that have 3 wins right now against top 5 teams. So, I mean, that right there tells you just how impressive of a season they've had.
Yeah, 100%. On the flip side, a team that started off relatively well, in fact, actually beat Mizzou at the beginning of the season in the bragging rights game, Illinois has just been not good. And we talked about this last week when we were going over their schedule. They had a game at home against number 3 Duke, a non-conference opponent in the final 5 games of the season that ends up as a top 5 program, and they get absolutely run out of their building, 110-67 they lost to Duke at home, outscored 54-37 and 56-30 in each half. And you look at it and you go, okay, if Illinois was playing at the top of their game, this is a great schedule to see where they're at against a fellow tournament team, to see where things are setting going into their conference tournament and then the NCAA tournament. Well, now you look at it and you go, why did you schedule this game when they've been struggling as much and it doesn't allow them to get right? And now you look at it, and a couple of weeks ago, Illinois was a lock to get into the NCAA tournament. They're still probably going to get in, but it's now starting to become very, very dangerous for Illini fans because they may miss out on the tournament because of this late season swoon.
Yeah, I think they're probably going to have to win a game or two in the Big Ten tournament, honestly, because they've got, I think they're 18-8 now, something like 18-8, 18-9, something along those lines. So I think they're probably going to have to win at least one game in their tournament. They probably need to almost win out the last couple of games here down the stretch, and then at least win one in the Big Ten tournament because, yeah, they've really struggled, like you said, and I think they're probably a bubble team. And so, I'm sure when they scheduled that game against Duke, they scheduled that game probably 3 years ago or something, right in the middle of the Kofi Coburn, those kind of guys on the team going, man, this is going to be a really nice matchup. Well, it's not quite the same Illinois team that it was a couple of years ago, and Duke is kind of back on the rise again after being down the last few years a little bit. Not that Duke ever goes very far down, but they're starting to get back to where they were under the Krzyzewski days. So a really tough battle for Illinois, and hopefully they can find a little magic these next few games and get on a little run and get themselves into the tournament, because it's always fun to watch the tournament when there's more local teams. You hated for Arkansas to win last night to beat Mizzou, but again, it's fun to see Arkansas get in the tournament too, because that's just another area team for you to root for. And another team that very well potentially could make the tournament as a 12 or 13 team could be SEMO. We could see the SEMO Redhawks get back into the tournament again.
Yeah, they've been playing really well. They earned at least a share of the OVC regular season title after their win against Lindenwood on Saturday. So yeah, they have a real good shot to do that, and they've got a lot of local products from the St. Louis area on that team as well. So if you can get a SEMO in, if you can get a Mizzou in, if you can get an Illinois in, and then if SLU can go on another magical run and win the A10 tournament, you may have the potential for 4 local teams and in Arkansas. That's 5 local teams that get into the big dance. Plenty of options for you to root for. And for Illinois, it is a tough stretch, though. They've got Iowa at home on Tuesday, and then back-to-back ranked opponents. They're on the road at Michigan, number 12, and then home to number 13, Purdue. So if they can find a way, I think, to go 2-1 in that stretch, that actually sets them up relatively nicely, and then get themselves a win or two in the Big Ten tournament. And right now, they sit at 9-8. They're tied with Oregon as they sit in the, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8th spot in the Big Ten right now. They're a couple games up on Nebraska and Indiana. But if they're able to score, 2 out of 3 wins there, that moves them up to 11-9 in the Big Ten. That gives them a top 8 seed in that tournament. And then again, if they can win a couple of games, maybe solidify themselves into one of those lower seeds in the NCAA tournament. And then again, all you got to do is get in. We've seen magical runs from, lower seeded teams. Again, if you get hot, if you get healthy, if you run up against a team that's not playing well, you can make a bit of a deep run as well. So just because you're a lower seeded team doesn't necessarily automatically count you out, especially now that we've had a couple 16 seeds win, games. It seems like anything can happen in the NCAA tournament.
Oh, absolutely. And it would be nice to see a bunch of local teams. I remember one year in the early 2000s, Mizzou, SLU, Illinois, Arkansas, SEMO, Missouri State, and Carbondale were all in the tournament.
Yep. Yeah, and that just gave you so much excitement, and none of them played each other as well, which helped because you didn't have to pick and choose who you wanted to win in a certain matchup. I know I had that problem when North Carolina and Illinois played in the national championship all those years ago. I'm a big Carolina fan. I was a big Illinois fan at the time because they had a really good squad, and that was a tough one to root for.
Oh, I'm sure. Yeah. Who did you end up going for in that game?
Oh, North Carolina. I mean, it's Michael Jordan all the way, man. I mean, I know he wasn't playing on the team, but it's the history there. It's Jordan. It was Roy Williams. It was all of that. So you had to go with the team that was dominant at the time, and pretty sure that was the years Tyler Hansborough was there as well. So a local product on that team. So there was a bit of a connection as well, even though nobody actually knew personally Tyler Hansborough, but it's still, Poplar Bluff, it's a local connection for sure.
Oh, absolutely.
But looking at, I'm pulling up bracketology right now. I know that it was updated back on Friday, but at the time, looking at who's sitting where, they had SEMO as an automatic qualifier playing in one of those first 4 games. They had them going up against Omaha. So if they were to win the OVC tournament, again, probably going to be one of those teams that maybe gets into, the first 4 game. At the time, looking through things here, moving to the East, they had Missouri at the 5 seed against number 12, George Mason. And we talked about this in the last couple of weeks. I want Mizzou to stay as far away from a 5 seed as they possibly can, because there's always at least one 5-12 upset, if not 2. And despite how well they played, knowing Mizzou's history, they'd be one of those teams that gets upset.
Oh, it could happen. It can even happen when you're a 2 seed.
That's true. That is true. And hopefully it does if Tennessee's a 2 seed, but that's neither here nor there. They had Illinois as a number 7 seed against San Diego State, the 10 seed, with the winner of that one facing off against Iowa State or Cleveland State. So they've got Illinois on the downside, as do we. We know that they have been slipping as of late, but a couple of wins here over the next week and a half could maybe right the ship for them. And for Mizzou, bounce back quickly, maybe get up and rise to a 4 spot in that NCAA tournament, give themselves a nice little bit of a run there, and maybe avoid the number 1 team in their bracket as long as they possibly can. And right now they have Duke as the number 1 in their bracket. So, I mean, that would be a lot of fun to see Mizzou going up against Duke. I remember that game where Brian Grauer was playing against Duke, and they almost won that one. So I'd like to see a little bit of payback for that.
Yeah, that would be nice. Anytime you can beat Duke, it's a good day.
Well, and again, as a North Carolina fan, you hate Duke. So anytime Duke loses, you are a happy college basketball fan. All right. Well, let's touch on real quick, because I'll be perfectly honest, not a whole lot happened in the game, but St. Louis City SC got underway last night. It was a frigid night down at Energizer Park, but it's still an electric atmosphere. Our buddy Tom Willenbrink was down there as well, as he's there pretty much all the time, and you could just tell from his status updates just how packed that place was, how excited people were to be back, excited about all of the new toys that the team has, brand new coach. They did ship off Indiana Vasilev a couple days ago to Philadelphia, but there was a little bit of a reason behind that. He was going to be down on the depth chart. He wasn't going to start, and he has a little bit of a connection with Bradley Carnell as well. So they were able to get about $1 million of general allocation money for him, which actually I think is a big time win for City, because it gives them the ability to spend money on a player that they really want to bring in, and also kind of rewarding a guy that put in a ton of work for City over the last couple of years and getting him to a spot that he could probably start in. He has a good relationship with the coach and allow him to continue to grow. So it sucks to lose a guy like Indiana, but at the same time, I think City did right by him and moved him to a good spot, and it allows both kind of programs to kind of move on.
Well, that's what you want in a trade. You want it to benefit the player and the team, and it sounds like it possibly did both of those things. So that's what you like to see.
Very much so. And last night against Colorado, not a whole lot of scoring. In fact, there was 0 scoring because it ended in a 0-0 draw last night. But there were a lot of exciting things, I think, that people saw in that matchup with the new players that are a part of this program. And, you look at it and everybody was excited about what João Klaus did in year number 1. He dealt with injuries last year. He played the whole game last night, which I think was a bit of a surprise to some people. And I think it also, you looked at it and realized that he has probably been passed up on this team. A guy that was very, very excitable, a player that people can get behind. But I think now, with the moves that have been made, some of the younger players that this team has brought in, he can kind of move into that elder statesman role and not be the focal point of the offense. And it's going to be real interesting to see how they develop that offense with these new pieces and with the new coach in place as well. So yes, Klaus got out there and played the whole game, but I would be shocked if we see him out there for extended periods of time the rest of this season goes on, because we got a lot of new young players that could prove very excitable.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting. Like we talk about with a lot of teams, we talked about this with the Blues. You've got a lot of new players. You got a new coach, a new system. It's going to take a little while for everything to kind of click and guys to figure out what their roles are on this team and how things are going to work. And, first game of the season last night, it was a little chilly outside, and City did what they seem to do pretty much every week last week. They had a draw.
Yeah, that they did. And right now, early in the season, get as many points as you possibly can. You want the win, obviously, but as long as you don't lose, I think things are setting up pretty nicely for you. And again, seeing some of these younger players getting a chance to get in and showcase what they're doing is really, really good to see. I'm very excited to be back at Energizer Park this year. And the thing of it is they just ran into a really, really good keeper. I mean, Zach Steffen, obviously a national team goaltender, and City absolutely dominated the game. I mean, 54% possession in that game. They put 17 shots toward the net. 5 of them were on goal. And I know you sit there and especially after watching the Blues game, going 5 shots on goal. That's it. In soccer, that's pretty good. I mean, there's not a whole lot of shot attempts that get on goal in games. So for you to have 5 on goal, including 6 corner kicks, it shows you that you definitely dominated that game and you probably deserve to get a goal or two. But going up against a guy that's a national team goaltender, you kind of sit there and go, okay, we didn't lose. We showed well. If we can take that game and build off of that going forward, things are going to bounce back pretty quickly for City this year. And Mason said it earlier, the fact that, every team in St. Louis is starting to kind of rise up with young talent right now. This could be a very, very fun time to be a St. Louis sports fan again.
Let's hope so. Let's hope that all this talent rises and lives up to the potential, and we have some victory parades to celebrate in the next few years in St. Louis.
I mean, I'm ready to book a couple of weekends here. I mean, I'd love to book, another June NHL celebration. I'd love to, schedule a late October, early November baseball parade, and for the MLS, you're going to be right around that time as well. I mean, there's nothing better than a parade in St. Louis, no matter what the temperature is.
That is very true. That is very, very true.
All right. Well, that is going to do it for us. A lot of stuff that we talked about today. Obviously, 4 Nations, NHL season back underway, trade deadline coming up there. We didn't talk about the NBA because after that abysmal NBA All-Star game, I don't think I'll ever watch an NBA product again. We talked about the Cardinals, spring training, some hot studs that are on the rise for this program, and hopefully we'll see them at the major league level this year. And lots of college basketball on the way here in the next couple of weeks with conference tournaments starting up and the NCAA bracket going to be unveiled later in March. That's going to be a lot of fun. Make sure you stay tuned for some bracket challenges that we'll be a part of later on in the month of March. And again, both of us are going to be extremely busy behind the mic over the next couple of weeks. Scott, like you said, basketball and baseball starting up. What do you got on the schedule this week?
I'm going to have going into some district basketball. So I'll be doing some boys basketball, some girls basketball. We'll be bouncing all over the place. I don't have my actual where I'm going to be yet. We'll find all that out tomorrow, but I know I'm going to be really busy.
Yeah, I'm right there with you, heading to Indianapolis for the OVC Track and Field Championships the next couple of days. And then very, very fortunate to be calling the Challenge Cup final on Friday night with my buddy Brad Callahan. Chaminade and DeSmet in the Challenge Cup final, the pinnacle of high school hockey championships in the St. Louis area. So make sure you tune in to prepcast.com for that, as we'll have the championship game there. And it is going to be an absolute blast to get out there. We were there this past weekend for the semifinals, and Centene was absolutely jam-packed with fans. And the fact that you're going to have Chaminade against DeSmet, there's not going to be a parking spot in the casino lot come Friday night.
No, that will definitely draw a crowd. Those two hockey powerhouses in the St. Louis area for sure.
That it certainly does. As always, we are very, very fortunate for Livestream STL for having us here on their network. We're able to be caught on their Roku channel, on their social media pages. Ray Halbrook has been so fortunately kind to us to help get us going here on the network. And we're going to be with you guys here every Sunday at 7 o'clock as we continue to push and push and push and build this as much as we possibly can, continuing to try and get as much local sports content out there as we possibly can to go along with all the other great groups that are doing stuff in the St. Louis area as well. It's not that you're contesting against other groups. We all want to work together to make sure that we're bringing you the best sports coverage that we possibly can and continue to get names out there that don't get recognized as much as they possibly can, because the Midwest is still considered flyover territory. We don't have a bias. It's always the East or West Coast, but the Midwest has some of the best sports and some of the best athletes across the entire country.
Absolutely. Well said.
So for that will wrap things up for us tonight. We will be back next Sunday, 7 o'clock, right here on Livestream STL. For Scott Tobin, I am Wags. Thank you so much for joining us. Have a great week. Enjoy the beautiful weather that we are going to have over the next couple of days. Then make sure you come back and join us on Sunday for another edition of the Toasted Tavern.